Welcome, 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 everyone. We are so excited to have you here. So my name is Natalia. I'm one of the co-leaders of the Accessibility and Disability Group, Action Group with HCAN. And on behalf of HCAN, we want to welcome you wholeheartedly to this event. We want to welcome the storytellers, the guests, the friends, the family, the interpreters, and our friends at Mainline Art Center for helping us to make all of this possible. So I'm going to start with a little bit of housekeeping. So the bathrooms are located, the entrance to the bathrooms are around the building this way. So if you take this sidewalk and follow it to the left, you'll see that there's a sign that says bathroom, and you just keep following the signs for the bathroom. So you'll take a right into the building and go straight down the hall, and they're just to the right when you're in the kitchen. And there is a quiet room on the opposite side. So if you follow the signs to the bathroom, you can take a left in the kitchen, and there's a library, which is the lovely quiet room, and there's also a little garden over here. We ask that you please wear masks inside. If you do not have one, there are masks located at the entrance to the building. When you leave the bathroom, make sure to leave this way as well, the way that you came. If you come through this way, you will be on camera. So we have some refreshments up here at the tables that you're welcome to, pretzels and water. There's a donation jar. We invite you to make a donation. There's a sign with a QR code. If you look at the QR code, you can find out more information about HCAN. It takes you straight to the HCAN website, and it takes you, there's a button that tells you how to donate. So that's another way to donate as well. So I think that's all of the housekeeping out of the way. So everyone, we're in for a treat. Can I get a show of hands? Who has heard of the Moth before? Really good, okay. So I see a few uninitiated people. So the Moth is a Peabody Award-winning, internationally recognized storytelling association. And we had the incredible good fortune to work with them. All of our storytellers that are up here today went through an intensive workshop series and crafted their stories with folks from the Moth. They did 5 sessions of 3-hour lessons. And I just feel so jealous for the people who haven't heard the stories for the first time. So I'm going to ask Jen Hallam to come up from the Arts Advocacy Group, and she's going to share a little bit with us about the art of storytelling.
Since I'm like half the size of Natalia.
Just pull the mic down. Just the mic, just tilt it down.
Yeah.
There you go.
That's good? Okay. So about a year and a half ago, the HCAN, Havertown-Area Community Action Network, for those of you who don't know what HCAN stands for, HCAN's Arts Advocacy Group, of which I'm a co-leader, and the Accessibility and Disability, or Disability and Accessibility Group of HCAN, decided that we were going to partner on something. We didn't know what that was. So it was a true collaboration in the sense that both of our groups came together. We had no pre-concocted plans about what we were going to do. We had no preconceived notions about what we could do. The door was sort of open for anything. And so we spent several months getting to know each other across our groups, which was really wonderful, and brainstorming. And we eventually landed on an idea that felt right to all of us. And that idea was doing a storytelling workshop and a story sharing event. And here, with a little or a lot of help from the Moth, we are a year and a half later. It seems to me really appropriate that the thing that we landed on was storytelling in terms of bringing our two groups together. Because storytelling is one of, if not the, oldest art form. It is the fundamental aspect of being human, this ability to communicate and express and transform through stories. And so stories do best what art does. And it also is probably the most accessible art form. It It does not require that you have any special tools. It doesn't require that you have an advanced degree or that you are able to get into some exclusive space. It doesn't require any kind of extraordinary physical prowess. It requires maybe some imagination, maybe not. The only thing that it truly, truly requires is life. Experiences, feelings, interactions, a problem, a resolution, a lack of a resolution, human things that we all share. That is the basis of the art of storytelling, and we all have that. So everyone can be a storyteller. Everyone has a story within them, and anyone can be a storyteller. And we're really grateful to the storytellers that are here today who have agreed to share their stories with us. And we hope that they inspire you to explore your own art of storytelling. So thank you.
Thank you, Jen. So, let's see. Okay, so the stories you will hear today are stories in the style of the Moth. So what that means is that they're true stories told live in about 5 minutes. So without further ado, let me introduce the first storyteller. So this person is a member of HCAN's civic engagement group, Indivisible. So please welcome to the stage, Peter.
10 years ago, I'd been living in this area for a while, for a few years, but I didn't feel like I'd made many friends, and I didn't feel like I'd successfully integrated into my new community. But I didn't really know what to do about it. I couldn't decide what to do about it. So I think I was just waiting for something to happen. But you have to be careful what you wish for, because what happened is that I got a text from my brother, which I didn't even know could happen because my brother lives in London. And when I called him back, he told me that our father had died. So I flew over to England for the funeral, and it was a time of profound grief. I never cry in public, but I cried in public. But my brother and my sister also cried in public at the funeral. And in another way, it was a time of great togetherness. That funeral we had planned carefully together. We had really gotten together and thought about what can we say, what can we do to best remember our father. And when we were doing that, I felt this tremendous sense of belonging, and it's what I felt that I was missing in my life back in Pennsylvania. One of the things we didn't plan, though, was what to do with my father's ashes. So I think there was actually a nice garden at the crematorium and an opportunity just to spread the ashes there. But I'm not the only one who's indecisive, and so for the time being, my sister just held on to those ashes. And I flew back to Philadelphia. But then a year later, there was a chance for some more togetherness. So I flew back over to London again to be with my brother and sister to help them go through some of my father's things. And we were sitting there with these plastic bags full of documents and objects. My father was not a well-organized man. And going through and telling stories about the objects and the documents that we found. And I learned all kinds of new things from my brother and sister that I'd never heard before about my dad and about the family. And one of the objects we came across was a silver medal. And I remember that my dad had told me that he'd won a medal for a poem that he'd written. I didn't know he still had the medal. And the poem was written in ancient Greek. My father was a professor of Greek. And I didn't know the Greek. I was a disappointment in that way. But I did remember the translation, and I was able to share it then, and I can share it now. The poem was designed to be put over the entrance to a public baths. And it went, "Take off your clothes and your troubles, and put on light and water and happiness." And it felt really good to have shared that memory and to be contributing to this set of memories that we were generating about my father. One object we didn't deal with at that time, though, was my father. So we still couldn't decide what to do with him. So his remains remained on the top of a closet in my sister's bedroom for the time being. And I flew back to Philadelphia again. But when I was back in this area, I started to think about how one of the things that can make you feel like you really belong in a community is to contribute to that community if you can. And so I decided I was going to volunteer, and I chose to volunteer to teach English, I think partly out of sympathy with other people who'd come from other places to this area. And I was matched up with a man called Muhammad, and in the course of practicing English, I learned about his story and the infinitely harder road that he had traveled to get here. So he started out in Guinea, and he moved to Madagascar, and he worked his way across Asia, and then he finally wound up in this area, and he opened a restaurant. And I learned much more from him, I'm sure, than he ever learned from me. So I was really pleased when one day he invited me to his restaurant. And so, of course, I went along to his restaurant, and the food was delicious, but more importantly, I got to see him there, I got to meet his wife, I got to see him interact with his regular customers, and I really admired this place that he had carved out for himself and for other people. And I was also really pleased that I felt like I was starting to make some new, really good connections. Meanwhile, my father's ashes had been looming over my sister as she went to bed every night for 4 years. And she was starting to get a little disconcerted by this, so I got a call from her saying, we really need to do something with Dad's ashes. So I flew over again to London, and I met up with my brother and sister again, and they had found a park that was between where they each lived in London. And we went to that park, we took my father's ashes into the park, and it was a beautiful day in spite of the fact that this was in England. And it was a lush green place, and we found this nice meadow that had a solitary tree in the middle of it, and we decided this is the place. We scattered my father's ashes around that tree, and then we just stood and we thought about my father, and it really felt like we found him a home. And then I thought about myself and the fact that I was soon going to be flying back to Philadelphia, and I decided to think of that as going home. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. So our next story comes to us from a member of HCAN's Disability and Accessibility Group. Let's hear it for Devin.
Testing. Okay. Okay. All right. My story is about how surviving COVID-19 helped me solve a lifelong riddle and to rebuild from the ground up. So for some background, I was what's known as a gifted and talented kid. I had the fastest words per minute typing count in my school. I went to spelling bees. I was called the walking dictionary. I had all of these, accolades very young. I taught myself programming. Everyone told me, you have so much potential, you're going to go so far. And they put all these burdens of expectation on me that I would be some sort of super genius. But, what they didn't see was that in 4th grade, I would forget things like jelly packets in my backpack that would explode all over my homework. And so I spent time in the back of the class trying to wash off my papers frantically before I turned them in. It was okay, I was getting by, but then middle school got a bit harder and deadlines became harder and I was forgetting all my homework. On the last day of school in 8th grade, on graduation day, my teacher actually had to stay after with me to finish a redo project, so he would let me graduate. High school got pretty bad. I couldn't keep up with the whole smart facade anymore. I did get accepted into a special engineering and robotics-based school. I was very excited. I was like, finally, I can learn all these things. But for some reason, no matter how much I wanted to learn it, no matter how much I wanted to apply myself, I couldn't do the work. I couldn't focus. I didn't know what was wrong with me. I wondered, what is it about me that I can be so smart, but I can't do these basic things that all the other kids can do? And I especially had trouble with math, and I would fail every year of math, and you have to go to summer school. And it got to the point in junior year that I thought about dropping out. But it all came to a head when my counselor at the school came to me and said, Devin, why don't you drop out so someone else can have your spot here? And so that's the point where I actually decided, screw you, I'm going to graduate. So that was a difficult time, but I pushed through and I made it. And I went to a community college afterward and got some associate's degrees. But so while I may look like I have it together on the outside, my house usually looks like a hurricane has run through it. I might have like dishes piled up, and I can't get off the couch sometimes to just do a thing, no matter how much I really want to do it. And I always wonder what's wrong with me. And I had seen some memes in the past about ADHD, but I had always thought, no, that's something that only little boys can have. That doesn't apply to me, so I still don't know what's wrong. But fast forward to March 2020, I had come back from a plane trip, and I started feeling pretty sick at work, muscle weakness, I lost my sense of smell, and I started having trouble breathing to the point where brushing my teeth, I was out of breath, like I had just run a marathon. So I thought I was dying. I was like, I better write a will or something. It felt pretty serious. But luckily I pulled through. And that's when I decided I've spent my whole life just surviving, just scraping by. Why don't I try thriving? So I sought out help, and I had spent time researching and isolating and looking up what could be going on. And I went back to those memes about ADHD, and I found this YouTube channel called How to ADHD, run by Jessica McCabe. And she taught me that anyone can have ADHD, not just little boys. It applies to anyone. It's just that women, people born as women, get misdiagnosed with bipolar or borderline, or just told they're crazy. So there's a huge disparity there. And in October of 2020, I finally got my diagnosis. I got medication, I got help, and I was equal parts relieved, angry, and sad. Sad because I was in mourning that it took until age 27, 20 years later than, you know, a boy might get it for being hyperactive in class. You know, I'd struggled through everything. It took 27 years, but I finally made it. And let's see, what was the last part I was going to say? Most of all, I learned to stop hating myself for something that was out of my control, and I learned to work with my disability instead. And I started coming up with accommodations for my home, buying home goods that work with my disabilities, like visual impediments, object permanence issues, time blindness. I found solutions to all of these problems. And but what I'm most proud of is that I've decided to start writing about my experiences so other people could know about them. And since then, 3 different friends have approached me saying, Devin, what you're writing sounds really familiar. Can you tell me more? And those 3 friends have now gotten their diagnoses. So no matter what I went through, it still helps to me to heal, knowing that I helped others on their journey. And that gives me the strength to keep pushing forward and keep talking about it. So, thank you.
Thank you, Devin. All right, let's welcome to the stage a member, one of our own in the Disability and Accessibility Action Group, Nadine.
Is that okay? Can you hear me? Yep. Okay. So, a lot of children like swings. When I was a child, I took liking swings to a whole nother level. I grew up in the Poconos. There were a lot of trees. In my yard, there were 2 really tall trees, metal bar, 2 chains, and a little bench. And that bench was my portal to another world. I would get up in the summertime at the crack of dawn because I had to beat the heat. I was going to be there for a long time, and I would get ready to go out to my swing. I had discovered that in this wooded area of the Poconos, not only were there a lot of trees, there were a lot of bugs, and especially these little gnat kind of things. And this was a problem, because as I was swinging through the air, those little gnats would come and they would hit me in the face and get in my eyes and in my nose and in my mouth, and that just interrupted everything. So I had to do something about that, and I thought about it, and I thought about it, and eventually I got my mom's sun hat. And I put it over my head, and I tried a few different scarves. I was troubleshooting here. Finally found this red scarf that I could put around my head and still see through it and breathe and feel some breeze. So I put this together as sort of a headgear for swing riding. And I would go out to my swing, and it was, by the way, it was a big enough swing that 2 people could have fit, but there was nobody else getting on this swing. And I can understand why people would maybe be hesitant to do that, because I was a little intense with the swing. And if you didn't know that right away, you could probably figure it out by the deep groove in the dirt underneath where my swing was. And I would go out with my headgear, sun would be coming up, I'd sit down on that swing, looking like a beekeeper, like a 6-year-old beekeeper, and I would plant my feet around the groove, I would push off, and I would sail up into the air, and I would feel like I was flying. I would feel weightless, and it was a marvelous, wonderful thing. The feeling was so freeing. And then I would come back down, and my stomach would go up and down, and I would only see things around me for a few swings back and forth, and soon they would just start to disappear. And suddenly what I saw was Candyland. I had a Candyland game, perhaps a few of you did as well. While most people play Candyland as a board game, I really wasn't into the whole board game aspect of it. I just liked to look at the picture. I loved that picture. I could look at it for a long, long time, and I did. And the colors, the images, it was so magical to me. And I would picture Candyland when I was up on my swing, and me being in Candyland, and I was going through the Gumdrop Mountains, and I was exploring things, and it was beautiful. And it was making me feel really, really good. And I was imagining, and I was pretending. And I would do that for a long time. And maybe on the outside, what someone would have seen was a little girl swinging back and forth and talking to herself for a very long period of time. And they wouldn't see what was happening on the inside. Well, the summer ultimately had to end, and I would have to go back to school. And there was a swing at school, but I wasn't allowed to ride it because people were concerned that I wasn't playing like the other kids were playing. And so they decided that I would not be able to play on the swing, because if they taught me how to play, I would be a better person, I suppose. So they would try to help me to pretend. A teacher once brought me off to the side and said to me, "Today we're going to pretend to be a princess." Now, by now I had figured out that there were right answers and there were wrong answers. It seemed like everything I said was a wrong answer. So when she said, "You're going to be a princess," I said, "Of where?" and she said, "I don't know. We're going to make up a world." And I said, "Okay, Candyland?" And she said, "Okay, Candyland." And so I was like, "Well, I have to go to the swing, and I want to play Candyland, so we're going to go to the swing." She said, No. You can't play Candyland now. We're being a princess." I said, "Well, yeah, but I want to go to the swing." And she said, "No, you have to learn to play pretend play so that you can play with other kids. You have to learn to imagine." And I didn't really have a way to be able to explain to her that when I said I want to play Candyland, I was imagining. So I just tried to do what she told me to do, and I couldn't do it well at first. But every day when I wasn't allowed to go play, I had to stay in practice and do the things she wanted me to do. It got easier over time. I learned how to pretend to pretend. I learned how to say whatever I was supposed to say. And even if it wasn't fun, I learned how to play their way. Over the years, I learned how to pretend in many, many contexts. And it got easier. It got easier to try to be like everyone else, although never really easy. And it got harder to try to find myself as a person, the person I used to be, who felt free and who felt like she could soar. And I think I went on that way for a long time, and eventually I developed a lot of anxiety. I developed some depression. I wasn't very healthy. I was not in a really good place, but some good things did happen. I met my husband, who is a really wonderful guy and incredibly understanding. He was an engineer, and he had met people like me before. And so, we had 2 wonderful kids. Well, when my eldest child was born, I immediately could see that he had some differences with learning. And our pediatrician recommended that we take him to have an evaluation. So we took him to be evaluated, and lo and behold, she told us that our son is autistic, like me. I'm autistic, I knew that already. And I thought, okay, makes sense. But then she went on, and she said a lot of other things that didn't sound right to me, but she made them so convincing, and she was a doctor. And so I was listening, and she was describing things that were so awful. You know, they sounded so bad and so scary. And she said, but don't worry, there's a kind of therapy you can do. And if you do it 40 hours a week, my son was 2, do it 40 hours a week, you know, he can learn to be indistinguishable from other kids. And you'll form a really good connection. And I said, we have a connection. I don't know if I want, but that was all. You know, I couldn't say it again. I couldn't say it, what I needed to say. And I went home, and I was sad, and I was depressed, and I was scared. And I didn't know what to do, because I was thinking, this has got to be a different autism. Because that's not what was happening with me. That's not how my life was. I could see he was a different person. He wasn't speaking as clearly as I can speak. But I had to really, really search within myself and think about it. And when I did, I realized, wow, what did they see when they saw that little girl swinging on that swing, talking to herself? What did they see? They saw the outside, but they didn't see Candyland. I saw Candyland. I know my son and I have a connection. I know we communicate. And so they're just seeing the outside. And so, you know what? I don't want him to have to pretend like I do. I'll get him speech therapy to help him talk. I'll get him OT to help him tie his shoes. I'll get him whatever support he needs, but I don't want any kind of therapy that's going to change him and make him indistinguishable. I want him to be him, and I want him to be able to ride his swing. And then I had a younger son, and lo and behold, runs in families. And so, you know, we're all neurodivergent, but they grew up in a different way because they were encouraged to embrace their differences and their interests and themselves as in an authentic way. And it's made a big difference. They don't have depression. They don't have anxiety. They're doing okay. Not that those are bad things. I'm just saying that they're not struggling in the same way that I had to struggle. And I think that one key piece to helping them get to that point was that I had to learn to stop hiding myself. And I had to learn to stop pretending to pretend. And that wasn't an easy process when you've done it for so many years. So I said, okay, I'm just going to stop pretending. And I started to disclose to people that I was diagnosed years ago as being autistic. And I started to say, you know, I may not want to make eye contact all the time. I hope that you accept that, but I am hearing you. I started to explain the way that I may look on the outside so people could understand that maybe they weren't seeing the whole thing. And the more I let myself be authentic, the more it helped my kids to be authentic. And now we're all pretty happy and healthy. And in that way, you know what? I got my swing back. It's always with me. You know, I have the ability to soar. And so do they.
Thank you so much, Nadine. So our next storyteller is a friend of HCAN through our partner Common Space. Please welcome to the stage, Owen.
Hey everyone, I just want you all to know I understand COVID's still going to take a while. That's still fine. What's gone, it's gone. Let me read this first.
Yeah, go ahead, I can hold it.
Oh, thank you. Tough and happy, silly Michael K. Boo, Stevie Bud from Schitt's Creek was still saying that, slowly texting people and started looking at, can you turn over? The text is still something I still always love doing every day, so thank you for all that. And the last thing is just about me still watching Glow Wrestling Show again later. That's still all just for now, so thank you for all that, and okay, bye. That's one good one. Why, thank you. Alrighty then. Tough and happy Rude Kim from Freaks and Geeks School Show is still going to say now that in Cobra Kai Karate Show, I love it when Sam says to her friend Aisha, what are you mad about? Just because Aisha says you realize we're not okay after Sam says, how's it going? After Aisha says, hey, after Sam says hi first. Well, thank you for all that. Before I still read this note to Nicole, and here, can you turn on, please? Thank you, Austin. First, the last thing is just about me still seeing a Kate from Common Space Lay only twice, only for a while. One time in my apartment, one time at Common Space. Yeah, I'm not seeing the lady Kate anymore, and I still miss that Kate lady. Well, thank you for all that. It's also just about me still seeing that tall Ava girl from Haverford for longer. First on Zoom for and then second for a little while in person. Yeah, even though she's not around anymore, it's still okay that she and I knew each other and hung out with each other only for a little while in the past. So thank you for all that. And the final point is just about the call from Creative Works, and I still hanging out at the Kinwood Trail near my house for hot chocolate again. Sometime at some point. That's still all just for now. So thank you for all that. Okay, bye. Well, thank you. Thank you, everyone. You're welcome. Want you to get a speech? I was just getting ready to say about COVID. I know it's still going to take a while to go away. That's still fine just for now. My dad and I are both tired of COVID. Well, I was a lot angrier about it, but once it's gone, I'll be less angry. I also want you all to know that I still miss going to dances at St. Catherine's, and my friend Julie from Planet White Marsh died just because of really annoying COVID. It made her die. That's one thing I want to say. And last thing we'll wrap it with is, that's why I want God for good to end.
Thank you, Owen. So our next member is a general member of HCAN. I'd like to welcome to the stage, Emmy.
I am not a dog lover, but my daughter has been a dog lover ever since she was a baby. And every time Christmases and birthdays would come along, she'd always want to get a dog. She'd ask me, am I going to get a dog this time? And I would say, no, over my dead body. I do not like dogs. I don't want to ever get a dog. And besides, I'd get a cat. So when she was about 10 or 11 years old, her Girl Scout troop went to the shelter and she had to earn a badge. When she got back home, she was so excited. And she said, Mom, did you know that we could walk the dogs there? And can you take me? And in my head, I said, ugh. But I said, okay. I guess we can go and we can walk, but I'm not going to bring one home. So I hope you understand that. So we go a couple weeks, and then I see that she has a liking to this certain dog, and they have a bond. And she was pestering me, and she wore me down, and we got the dog. So Sandra came home, and she was a 2-year-old Australian cow herding dog, full of energy. And we would have to walk her, really jog, for 10 miles a day, when normally I would do about 3 miles. And her true nature started to come out. She would start nipping at our heels and try to corner us in the room. And one time, she even gently grabbed the back of my husband's suit coat and dragged him over. So we were about 2 months into this adventure, and my husband had to go away for a conference, and I had to take care of the dog by myself. And so after a long day of work, coming home, walking, jogging the dog, really, 10 miles, I was on the verge of a physical and mental breakdown. So sitting at the kitchen table, I came to the realization that this relationship was not going to work, that this was a working dog, and I didn't have a job to give her. She really belonged on a farm chasing sheep. So on Saturday, I take my daughter and Sandra, we pile in the car, and we get to the shelter a half hour early, and we're there when the door opens up at 12. So I'm talking to the intake person, telling my story, getting a little upset, and basically the intake person said, "No, we don't have room to bring her in today." And I was getting so upset, crying. And the manager, who had been in the background, had heard my story, and she came, took pity on me, and said, "Yeah, we'll take her." So my daughter and I say a tearful goodbye. And then my daughter turns around and says, "Mom, can we adopt another dog today?" And I say, "No, I'm sad. I need some time to get over this." So over the next couple months, she's looking on the internet, looking up the website, looking at all the dogs, and she decides that she wants to meet this Chihuahua. So my husband, my daughter, and I get in the car one Saturday. We get there around 2 o'clock. And as we start going into the shelter, coming out of the door is a family with that Chihuahua that they had just adopted. And in my head, I'm going, "Yay! Thank you, Jesus." And so my daughter turns around angrily and says, "If we had gotten here earlier like I wanted to, we would have gone home with that Chihuahua." So we look at the dogs there. We actually go to a second shelter. And as we're going up and down the aisles, and I'm looking at pit bulls and pit bull mixes, I turn around the corner, and I see this little black dog with matted hair. And as I bend down to check it out, it wags its tail at me. And I say, "That's the dog I want." So we bring home Sammy, and now I am a lover of this particular dog, who's become my best friend, and my buddy. And I sometimes think that I love my dog a little bit more than my husband sometimes, but don't tell him that. Thank you.
Thank you, Emmy. Is Emmy's husband in the crowd? You don't have to make yourself known, that's okay. Our next storyteller comes to us from HCAN's Racial Justice Group. Let's hear it for Ariel.
Mic check? My story is dedicated lovingly to all the parents out there. On our very first spring break vacation at the University of Michigan, my boyfriend and I decided to take a short trip to New York City and Ellis Island. It was a sunny, crisp day. The glistening water under the ferry were inviting us for new adventures. And as we were nearing the island, we saw Lady Liberty standing proud and tall, welcoming us to the island. Walking down the halls and hallways of the visitor center, I was thinking about all those who passed before, being prodded, examined both intellectually and physically by the workers at Ellis Island, who decided who shall enter and who shall not. After searching for our ancestors' names in the records and looking for the places where immigrants came from, my husband and I continued our journey until we landed in front of a wall. On the wall were newspaper clippings written in Yiddish. Yiddish is the language of my ancestors. It is a Jewish language that is a combination of 10th century German and Hebrew. The letters in Yiddish are written in Hebrew letters, and the grammar and words are mostly German, with Hebrew words sprinkled in between. As a Hebrew speaker, I can read Yiddish, but I do not understand or speak it. My parents, grandparents, their great-grandparents, and millions of Jews who lived in Europe spoke Yiddish. They told jokes in Yiddish, they wrote stories and plays in Yiddish. They loved and laughed and cried in Yiddish. My parents never learned Yiddish directly through direct communication. They learned it by trying to decipher the secrets their parents were telling each other in that language. Their parents spoke to them in Hebrew, the newly revived Jewish language that previously was only spoken during prayer and the study of Talmud and Torah. So there we were, standing in front of the wall, my German boyfriend and I, me, able to read but not understand what I was reading, him unable to read, explaining to me what I was reading. Golden Medina, the author of the article, told their brothers and sisters who were coming to this country, the Golden State, where there's gold lying in the street, ripe for the picking. I knew right away I had to tell my parents about me and my German boyfriend reading Yiddish together. It was an act of kindness. I knew my parents struggled with my decision to date and then later marry a non-Jewish German. I got an inkling of it when, after telling my mom that I was dating a German boy, she said, "Ariel, I heard there are a lot of nice Israelis studying at the University of Michigan. Have you happened to meet any of them?" And then when that didn't work, she moved to the less desirable but still acceptable group of young men, American Jews. "Ariel," she said, "have you been to Hillel? I heard it's a wonderful place to meet people." She finally relented. My parents learned to love my husband and care for him. They threw us a wonderful reception after our wedding at a Turkish bathhouse in Jaffa. and cared for us both emotionally and financially in the following years. They sent my husband warm wishes and presents for all his birthdays. My parents' decision to embrace my husband and my choice lies in a family lore that is both exhilarating and full of despair. In 1939, 5 years after she left home, at the tender age of 16, to prepare for life on a kibbutz, my grandmother said final farewell to Europe, following her dream to become a free and fully liberated Jew in the land of her ancestors, the land of Israel. For her parents, religious Jews, that dream of Jews building a Jewish state before the arrival of the Messiah meant she was no longer a Jew. For them, it was a fate worse than death. So they mourned her. They said Shiva on her, the Jewish mourning ritual. And then in 1944, after she narrowly escaped the Nazis, managed to evade the British, who, if she was caught, would send her to internment camp in Cyprus, building a life for herself with her husband and her new baby girl. Her parents, along with her sister's husband, and their 2 babies, were taken to Auschwitz. Concentration camp, where they were murdered by the Germans using chemical agent Cyclone B. These 2 stories of my family inform my parenting today. I apprise my children of my expectations, dreams, and wishes for them, knowing full well there's a fat chance they'll do even half of it. So I let them know that whatever choices they'll make, they will always have a home with me. Thank you.
Thank you, Ariel. So before we take a little 5-minute intermission break, we're going to have one more speaker come to the stage. So the last storyteller before our little break is a general member of HCAN. Let's hear it for Francine.
Hi. So for many years, I have been studying myths and stories and folk tales and fairy tales. And there's one specifically that is very dear to my heart, and it is the story of the handless maiden. In that story, there's a shadowy devil figure who wants to have this young maiden. And he comes to her to take her with him, and she draws a circle around her body. And it's a circle of protection, and he can't take her. And he's angry, and he leaves, and he said, I'll come back next year. And the next year he comes back, and again she draws a circle around herself. And this circle is made from innocence and love and her pure heart and her beauty, and he can't approach, and he has to leave again, angry. And he says, I will come back. And 1 year later he comes back, but this time he orders for her hands to be cut. And that's how she becomes the handless maiden. And she's crying, and he comes toward her, and her tears flow and washes her wrists and her dress, and make a big circle around herself, a circle made of her pure heart and her beauty. And he's defeated again, and he can't take her. And he leaves, and this time he never comes back. Last September, I went to my first ever mammogram. And a week later, I received a message that I had to go again. So I went back to the hospital, and after the mammogram, I was told to wait because I needed more exams and an X-ray, and the doctor needed to come and talk to me. And I was led to a waiting room, which was much nicer than the first two ones. It was like an upgrade in my own story, with big bay windows and a view on the park and the seminary and the big, beautiful trees. And the chairs were very comfortable, and there were big abstract art paintings in the waiting room. And I sat there, and I was wearing a special gown that you have to wear when you come to the breast center. You have to take your clothes in your of your upper body off, and you put them in a plastic bag, and you wear that blue indigo gown, which is one of my very favorite colors. And I was waiting, and with me were a few other women. One was at least in her late 70s. One was from a very different ethnic background than me. One had a different size and body shape than mine. And I realized how amazing is it that we all fit in that same gown. We are all given that same 100% cotton blue indigo gown, and it fits us. And I wanted to talk to these women. I wanted to open a conversation. I wanted to ask them how they were doing. I wanted to ask how they were managing all these emotions and this big unknown that surrounded us. But I didn't dare. And after that day, a few weeks later, I had a biopsy, and then I had another biopsy, and then I had surgery. But after that first biopsy, I took off my gown and put my clothes back on. And as I walked out of the hospital, I had to sit somewhere. I needed a little time to recover. And I found in the lobby of the hospital a small round table with just one chair near a window. And I sat there and I cried, and I had to let go of all the intensity of the procedure, the pain in my heart, the pain in my body, and this big, heavy load of what's next. And then I went back home to my family, and then I went to sleep. And that night, the handless maiden came, and she sat on my bed with her beautiful dress, and she said, "Francine, let's go back." And so she took me to the hospital, to the breast center, and she started to draw circles. And she drew circles around the big abstract art that was on the walls. And she drew circles around the mammogram machine, and around the biopsy table, and the X-ray. And she drew circles in the hallways. And then she went with me to the waiting room, and we drew circles around each chair where the women were waiting with me that afternoon, and where many women went before that, and many women will come after us. And then we went out of the breast center and in the lobby of the hospital, and she stopped near the table, and she drew a huge, big neon pink circle, and it was beautiful. And I realized that all these circles connected to each other somehow. And in the story of the Handless Maiden, after many adventures in the folk tale, she finds herself in the woods, in a cottage. And in that cottage live the Wood Sisters. The Wood Sisters are a group of women of all ages and all kinds of stories. And they welcome her, and they feed her, they bathe her, they sing her songs. And what happens is quite a miracle, because over time, days after days, in her time with the Wood Sisters, she grows her hands back. And I realized that the Handless Maiden and I, when we drew all these circles at the hospital for the women who were there before, for the women who were there with me, and for the women who will be there, it was a way to grow ourselves back. Thank you.
Thank you, Francine. So we are going to take a little 5-minute break. Let me see. To stretch, to get some water, refreshments, and we're going to try and be back in our seats at 4:05, okay? And try and beat this rain for the next half of our program. Thank you. Hello. Look what we did. We did a set change. So the second act of our performance is a whole new set. All right. Let's get back into the stories. So the next person who's going to share their story is a friend of HCAN through the Arts Advocacy Group and our partner and gracious hosts here at the Mainline Arts Center. Please welcome Intisar.
How we doing? I'm a Philly fly girl. Yeah. I'm a mamacita. I'm a yo-shorty. It's the fall of 2001. I'm a senior in high school. I'm 17. When I wait for the bus, car stop in sweatpants. I go to a performing arts magnet school. I'm a dance major. Me and my girls, like, we're it. We dance in the parades, we're smart, we can like hold down an 8 count. Someone has the bright idea for us to do a cross-cultural connection with an all-boys school on the main line. Sure, why not? I could use a good prom date to scandalize the class, let's do it. So we ride the bus in our Philly finest of the main line. We get there, and our school was brand new, so we thought we had a really good school. Our school could fit into their cafeterias. It's this big school, rolling lawns. It's nice. So we're going to do an icebreaker. We have a facilitator. We're out there on the lawn. They're like, line up. Cool. Me and my girls are like, oh, these boys about to get dusted. They don't even know. You know, like we're about to race. And so the facilitator says, take a step forward if you feel safe walking by yourself at night. Take a step forward if you have a savings account. Take a step forward if you're a citizen. And so on and so forth. Questions like this just keep progressing. And you either take a step forward or you don't. So we've reached the end of the game. Me and my girls were like, okay, all right. And then we look far ahead down that rolling lawn to the end, where the winners are, who are high-fiving and chest bumping. And it's one thing to learn about your history and to learn about who you are and your place and how you get to be where you are. It's one thing to learn that. And then it's another thing to play the game of power and privilege in America and you see where you are. Nobody's volunteering to be poor, black, and female. So needless to say, the ride home was very different than the ride up. And I struggled for a long time of where to put this new information. And I found numbers, numerology. And I wanted a black way of understanding numbers, because I'm black. And I did it, I found one. I found the concept of zero. It's a very African concept, and it says just what you might imagine. You know, zero from the surface appears to be nothing, a placeholder, something to start. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. But a 0 in front of a 1 is very different than a 0 behind a 1. It's very different than 2 zeros, very different than 3 zeros, on and so forth. Infinity times 0 is 0. A trillion divided by 0 is 0. I discovered peace. discovered that my value is immutable, unchanging, everlasting, and that there's nothing anybody can do about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Intisar. Our next storyteller coming to us from the Disability and Accessibility Group, it's Barbara.
Test, test. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
When I entered elementary school, schools at the time did not have that much experience with physically disabled children. And to make matters more interesting for that school, I'm an identical twin, and my twin does not have my disability, or a disability for that matter. And when every child enters first grade in our school district, they're usually given a test to see where they land in reading, writing, numbers, and so forth. And my twin was given that test. And she excelled. And because they had to split us up, and we weren't allowed to be in the same classroom, she was placed in a classroom that needed less help, or had less help provided. And because I needed extra help, it was just assumed that I was going to need extra help. So I wasn't given that test. And I was placed in the classroom with extra help. Now, the kind of extra help that I needed was I didn't walk very well at the time, and I couldn't hold pencil very well. So I was the only physically disabled child in the whole school for all the years I was there, from grade 1 to grade 6. By the time I reached 7th grade, my twin was in above average classes, and I was in average classes. I was bullied a lot and ostracized daily, and I blame that for my being average classes, when I knew I was smarter than that. And all I wanted to do was be in class with my sister, because my sister and her friends were always much kinder to me than the classmates that I had. They always included me in play and accepted me the way I was. At the end of 7th grade, we were given a chance to take an algebra test, or a test to see if we were in algebra the next year, a year early. So instead of 9th grade, take it in 8th grade. I thought, oh, this is my chance to be in a class with my sister, or begin the process of being all above average classes, because I knew I was smart. I learned more about this test. This test is a timed test. It has multiple choice questions, and it's, of course, obviously about math. Now, I don't take time tests very well. Never did, never will, still don't. Because you know those little circles that you have to fill with your pencil? They're my nemesis, especially with that hand. So I knew when I sat down to take this test, pencil in hand, I wasn't going to finish. So I was angry, but I was going to do my best and see what happens. Well, the bell rings, and I only finished 50. What's 50 out of 100? An F. There goes my chance. A couple days later, we get the results back. I look at my results. Holy cow! I got all 50 correct! Imagine if I had the time to finish all 100. That would mean I would be in algebra. I deserve to be in algebra. I got all 50 correct. So I took myself down to the guidance counselor's office the next day to have a discussion about it with her. She didn't say no, but she said she would need to talk to the current teachers I had and the future teachers I was going to have if this all was going to pan out the way I was hoping. And they also needed to talk to my parents, because I didn't tell my parents what I was doing. All the teachers but one thought I would do okay in all above average classes. kind of lucky there, aren't I? So all that summer, my mom worked with me to get me up to speed on the math I missed because I'm essentially skipping a grade. And by the time 8th grade came, 8th grade went, I did okay in all my classes. And I was in all above average classes at the time. So summer comes for 9th grade, and you get your schedule for 9th grade, and you're looking at it, you're comparing it with your sister and saying, oh, look, we got biology together, cool. I look closer at it, and I see that the math class I was slated to take is not there, instead some other math class. What happened? Well, it turns out that the special gym class I have been taking since 7th grade coincided in time with the math class I was going to take. And gym was more important, so it won. Not my family. My mom's a math teacher, my dad's a computer scientist. That's not gonna fly. So it was agreed upon that I would take gym in the library and write reports on sports. I would never play. But that's okay, because I was in class with my sister. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. All right, so our next storyteller comes from the Climate Action Group and the Gender Equity Team. Let's give it up for the overachiever.
I don't think anybody's ever called me that. I'll take it. You all know people who idealize the past. They see everything through rose-colored glasses. My God, when I was a kid, yada, yada. Well, when you suffer with depression, it's often the opposite. You see things that happen, maybe even beautiful things, and all you can do is treat yourself with self-criticism and sometimes even shame. I'll give you an example. In 1986, I was given the opportunity to go to China soon after the doors opened to the West. And I was placed in a small city of 2 million in north-central China, claimed to fame, the world's second largest open-air coal mine. The air was filthy. And then the Gobi Desert was to the west of us, and the wind would blow the yellow dust into town. So our windowsills, the toilet seats, everything was covered with a fine layer of dust. But it was cool, it was interesting. I taught graduate students in English. And one of my students came from a small village and invited me to his wedding. So with another student, I got a diesel train for 2 hours through the dusty countryside, I don't know, Arizona or something. And then 2 hours in, we arrived at a large train station in a small town. And I'm met by a minibus. And we take a bus down sort of windy, steep roads until we get dropped off seemingly in the middle of nowhere when some bicycles come from around the corner. And we were to hop side saddle onto the bicycles, and in this way, our final journey into town. It's not a town, it's a village. It's a very small walled village. Every compound is surrounded by a wall. You enter through a moon gate. Beyond the gate is a wall, but it's a false wall. It has a mural, but it's there to block the evil spirits. And when you enter, you go around the gate, around the wall, and then you're in the courtyard. And beyond the courtyard is a door and a window that leads into a cave. And these people live in cave houses. Or they build the homes into a wall, so it becomes like a cave. I took out my camera. How amazing to be in a place like this. But I'm instantly surrounded by the villagers who have never had their photographs taken. So that becomes my job. And we start with the oldest generation. Sitting, someone grabs a folding chair, like yours aren't folded, but anyway, and place them in front of the gate and start getting their photos taken. The older women's had bound feet. You won't find that anymore. That generation is gone. But the sun started getting low in the sky, the shadows were slanted, so pick up the chairs and grab a mini bike, and together we chased the shadows around the village until we found the edge of a canyon where finally there was enough sunlight. And in ones and twos, a baby in a tin carriage, people gathered and I got their photos all taken. That evening we went back, had a marvelous wedding, saw local Chinese opera, and I spent the night. The next morning I was invited to stay. And I'd love to tell you about how I stayed, and I learned the stories of the elder generation, what it was like to have bound feet. But I can't, because I didn't. I got on a train. There was like a cute guy back in Taiyuan where I taught. I don't even remember his name now. And so, yeah, I look back and say, what an idiot, I blew it, what an opportunity. And I went on to grad school and I met these students who had gone to these villages or other areas of China and stayed immersed for 3 years, never spoke English, and I compared myself. And my husband says, well, he says he's quoting the Buddha, I don't know, but he always said, all comparison is suffering. And it is. So fast forward to a couple years ago, my son went to Costa Rica. It was only for a week, but he was shadowing some ambulances and was really excited. And he posted pictures of stucco walls, beautiful colors, cast iron gates, and on the weekend he went to the beach. And there were pictures of him holding beers with a drunken look on his face. And I thought, well, you blew it. You were so close to the ruins, and this is how you spend your weekend. I didn't say this, but I thought it. And then I thought, oh, he's 22. He's acting like a 22-year-old. And I realized I was 22 when I was in China. And so I was able to look back at my life and my experiences with acceptance and compassion. And telling it now, I can see the experiences for the magical times that they actually were. Thank you.
Thank you, Meg. All right, our next storyteller is a friend of HCAN through the Arts Advocacy Group. Let's give a warm welcome to the stage, Teresa.
One of the best weeks of my life was the week I spent with my brother when he went into hospice care and died. We were born 363 days apart. Now, in the 1950s, that meant we shared a playpen, we shared everything. We were, Teresa and Joe, one word. But we could fight, and we also fought as adults. Once my husband asked me, why do you stay so connected to your brother? And I said, you don't understand. You only see his armor, I see his soul. So of course, when Joe went into hospice, I ran straight to him. Hospice provides drugs, a lot of drugs. I was thrilled. I knew Joe would not suffer. Joe, on the other hand, looked at the drugs and said, that's it. I'm just going to take them all, and that's the end of it. And I thought, well, it's, your life, your body, your choice. And I thought, he's going to be dead in a week anyway. He should just do what he wants. But Joe decided to stick around. And he had some important papers he needed to sign at the bank. So we thought the best thing to do was to load Joe up in the back of the car and drive over to the bank parking lot and let the bank bring the papers to him. So, good plan. That's what we're going to do. So, where Joe and I are sitting in the car, his wife goes in to get the bank manager. Joe's eyes get super big, and he says, Trees, it's happening now. I'm going out of my body right now. And I'm like, oh no. We need these papers signed. I get in his face and I say, you get back here right now. We freeze. Joe re-enters his body, and we crack up. We are laughing so hard, we cannot make ourselves stop. Out comes my sister-in-law with the bank manager. She shoots me a look that says, "What are you two doing?" Makes me laugh even more. The bank manager gives Joe the papers. I'm fumbling. We're just laughing about old times. We finish up. We go home. We're home 5 minutes, and the bank calls. Apparently, they think we're running some kind of swindle to get Joe's money, and now he has to answer security questions on the account. Great. The guy is completely drugged up. He's in a brain fog. He now has to take a test, and there's money riding on his answers. What could go wrong? No, Joe sits right up. He just spews off those answers. I'm impressed. The bank is completely satisfied. Joe slumps into his dying thing, and he says, "I think I'm having a good death." I said, "Joe, you are having a very good death." He starts to go downhill. He's pretty much stuck in the recliner at this point, but he says, "I'd like to look out the window one last time." All right, it's 3 steps away. We help him up, 1 step, 2 step. I said, "Jack, my sister-in-law, he's going down." I scoop him up under his armpits. My sister-in-law's got his knees and his ankles. I said, "Pivot, Jack. If he falls on the floor, we're so done. We'll never get him up." And as we're doing this, I've got Joe on his head on my shoulder, and in his drugged up, groggy voice, he says, "I love you." And right there, in that moment, it's just me and Joe, our 2 little spirits in the playpen, communicating before we even had language. And I say, "Joe, I love you too." We get him back in the chair. Joe gets to the point where he's not on the earth plane and he's not dead. And he's grimacing, and it looks like he's trapped. It's kind of scary. So I raise my voice. I'm not quite sure what he hears, and I go, "Joe, there are blueprints on the table." He could read prints. On the prints, you will see a door that corresponds to a door in the room. You'll know where the door is. Just walk through. You'll be fine. 5 seconds later, Joe's gone. We burst into applause. "Get out of here! Go!" We're so happy for Joe. Be at peace. My sister-in-law turns to me and she says, "I'm not comfortable sending Joe's dirty body to the funeral home." I said, "Well, I'm not either." Now, if you had told me at some point in my life I'd be washing a corpse, I would have said, "No way." But there was nothing I wasn't going to do for Joe this week. It felt like an honor. We got the soapy water. We got everywhere we could get. We get the gunk out of his eyes. We brush his hair. And I am very pleased with the job that we did. And I remember thinking, now that is one good smelling dead body. We did a good job. All felt right with the world. We had concluded Joe's business. And I didn't realize until years later the gift that Joe had given me that week. I came to understand that when there is love, there is no fear, none. I miss you, brother. Thank you for letting me be a part of your very good death. Thank you.
Is a member of HCAN, also named Joe. Please welcome Joe to the stage.
Boy, I hope this is not a death at all. The difference between darkness that is scary and darkness that is deep is trust. I was in a cabin in Forksville, Pennsylvania. It's been sheeting rain for 3 days. And I was feeling an awful lot of the darkness, not very much of the trust. I was there with my son, who 9 years old at the time, was the first of my 2 beautiful children, the person who made me a father. And before that point, I was an athlete, I was a musician, I was a guy with a job. The moment he was born, the only thing I wanted was to be a great dad. And I felt like I was doing pretty good on that front, at least passively, until COVID visited us and brought some darkness into our home. So we all have a clotting disorder that makes complications much scarier for us. So we have had to really stay home and stick together and wait it out. And in the time that that's happened, I watched my beautiful boy's heart get broken about 1,000 times. No baseball. Parents came for Christmas with masks, left the gifts outside in the yard, and we waved at each other through the door. When his best friend, the boy next door, best friend of his entire life, moved away, no hug. So Halloween weekend was coming up, and there was no chance that I was going to let him be stuck in that house and watch out his windows as all the kids from the neighborhood, all the friends that he couldn't see, streamed through the street, came to our house for candy and got a sugar high. That would be yet another thing that he was not allowed to have. So I booked us a cabin at the very aptly named World's End State Park. And I planned a long weekend. I took off 2 days of work that I could not take, and I planned for the centerpiece of the trip a side trip to a place called Cherry Springs State Park. It's a state astronomy park, and it's carved into the top of a mountain, and you're not allowed to have any lights nearby. It is the best place east of the Mississippi to see the stars. And I needed my son to know that the world was way bigger than it felt. And as that was what I planned, I spent money violently. I got a telescope, binoculars, star charts, a special blanket that was waterproof on one side so we'd be able to lay down and look at the stars. I got a half a dozen, they're cheaper than a half dozen, I guess. Those little red lights. There's no white light on the top of this thing. I bought everything that I would possibly need for it to be the perfect night under the stars. It was going to be perfect because it was going to make it perfect. And as the day drew nearer, we got more darkness in the forecast. And it started to rain, and it did not stop. And so that's where we found ourselves in the cabin after 3 sheeting days of rain, and it continued to pour. And this was the night that we were going to go to Cherry Springs. This is what we had planned. And I started to try and protect him. I felt like I had him before. For all the other little heartbreaks, I felt like a better dad would have protected him. And so I started to say, hey, Bubba, why don't we skip it this time? We'll come back. And you know what? The weather will be way better, and it'll be perfect. And he goes, Daddy, it's going to be fine. And I said, Finn, let's stay here. We'll have a wonderful time here. And he said, no, Daddy, let's go. And it's raining outside. I didn't want to be hurt. So we got in a car, and we started to drive, and we're talking, and I'm thinking of everything I could possibly tell him to keep him occupied. And after about an hour, I noticed that the rain had stopped. And I thought, well, we're not going to see the stars, and that's fine, but at least we got a break from the rain. Man, I'm grateful for that. And we kept driving, and the sun started to go down, and we got one of those sunsets that's like pink and purple, and it covers the whole sky. And every time you see one of those, at least for me, it's a reminder that man, you should really look up more often. And we kept going, and we made our way to the top of the mountain. It got dark, and it is an astronomy park, so there's no light anywhere. I'm not exactly the world's greatest navigator, and so we walked all over all these different fields, soaked our feet in 1,000 hidden puddles, went to the wrong field, and finally ended up in the correct field, the place where I had planned for us to end up. And I looked up and there was not one cloud in the sky. And we started to spread the blanket out, and he said, "Daddy, see, I told you." And we laid down, and we looked up, and there were more stars in the sky than I had ever seen. It was like the finest glitter you can imagine, just spread thinly as far as the eye could see. And we laid there with my son beside me and the entire world behind us. I learned that only in such darkness can there be such light. Thank you.
We have one last story for you. Let's hear it for a member of our Racial Justice Action Group and our last storyteller, Raja.
So in 1984, I was living in South Georgia, and I was in first grade. And I loved first grade. A number of reasons, but one was I really loved my first grade teacher, Miss Odom. So if you can imagine someone who has the softest down on her arms and nice big pillowy arms, it's like wrapping my arms around her every day in class was like hugging a pillow. But I also loved Miss Odom because she let me spend a lot of time in class after I finished my work doing one of my favorite activities, which was to make paper dolls. And in 1980s, paper dolls were awesome. If you don't remember this, they were like the bomb. So my mom wouldn't always buy all paper dolls that I wanted to, so I learned a technique of making my own paper dolls out of notebook paper. So you can imagine, after I turned my worksheets, I would lay out my notebook and I would have all these fashion illustrations I would be cutting meticulously out, putting my little slits in, sliding my doll in. My dolls had full wardrobes that heavily featured the color Midnight Blue, which is my favorite crayon brown. So first grade for me was everything. And 30 years later, I was a mom, and my oldest child went to first grade. And he loved first grade. He also loved his teacher, and he also loved The Hobbit. So back in the day, there were kids that liked, Lord of the Rings, and there were kids that liked The Hobbit and Harry Potter, and this was a first grader who was really into The Hobbit. So those of you that don't know all the characters, Thorin Oakenshield is like the leader, So he was 6 years old, he would wear these things like robes wrapped around him, and every stick and rock became like a weapon. And in his first grade class, they had these stacks of sketchbooks they got to fill up when they finished work. And so I'm at a parent-teacher conference, I noticed there's a stack of these, and they're quite large, not quite 8.5 by 11, but big, heavy sketchbooks. Every inch of every page, front, back, cover, was covered with scenes from Hobbit. Every character, every outfit, the words, the battle scenes in meticulous detail, and it was in the tiniest of little scribbles to the largest of things, colored in every color of crayon. I just kept thinking, oh my gosh, he got to have this amazing first grade experience, and I also love first grade. 2 years later, we moved to the suburbs of Philadelphia, because I got a job up here, so we moved to Ardmore. And my youngest son was heading into first grade. And my youngest son also has a zest for life and loves a lot of things. And I think he still ended up loving first grade, but not maybe for the same reasons that me and my older son did. This was a kid who loved pretty much everything, but he especially loved to draw. When I say he loved to draw, from the minute he could hold on to a pencil or a crayon or marker, he drew on everything. Nothing is safe. Like bunk beds were covered with seams. When he learned to draw, he had the letter N for his first initial of his first name. There were N's on hardwood floors. I remember one morning I woke up and he was like passed out, exhausted, covered with silver Sharpie. He had found every toy in his toy box and had coated every inch of it with silver Sharpie. it's not the Midas touch, it's the silver Sharpie touch, right? And the pen was empty. That's the only reason he stopped is because he ran out of ink, right? So he's in first grade, and I'm helping him with his homework. And by the way, first grade in Oregon was a lot of homework. And I'm looking at his lettering, and first grade worksheets are pretty standard. It's like, finish writing these letters. So, in one worksheet in particular, I remember it had words that ended with the letters E and N. So, hen, pen, ten, right? So, it would start with the first letter, and you would trace that, and then you had to, on your own, write the E and write the N. Well, the end of every single letter was this beautiful, perfect spiral curlicue. So it was like H, E, and then at the end of the E would be a little spiral. And if you can imagine sort of the vowel symbols on like Thai, written Thai script, right? Everything had this flair to it. But on the worksheet when he brought it home, with the teacher's comments, there was a note. Nuri, please make sure that you are writing in the accepted first grade way. And so the teacher had gone and corrected his writing, and the column next to him, rewriting the same words, but in red. And the only difference, if you looked at the precision in his lettering, was her letters didn't have the beautiful curlicues at the end. Now, as someone who grew up in the 80s, I spent a long time perfecting the little hearts over my eyes, so I can really appreciate the time and energy Nuri had put into making these worksheets look beautiful. But something else about Nuri's worksheets were he always added a little bit of extra. Well, one day I got a call home from school. I was like, we really need to talk to you about Nuri. And I'm thinking, oh gosh, did he hit somebody? Did he spit on somebody? He's a zesty kid. What do you do? What do you do? Well, we talk about his worksheets. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, we stopped putting the curlicues on the letters. What's going on with the worksheets? Well, Nuri had been drawing on his worksheets. And I don't know if I maybe described this, but I started this career as a designer when I was first grade. And I had actually grown up and become a designer. Not only am I a designer, I teach design at Drexel. I actually lead a design program. So I said to her, what's wrong with drawing? And she was like, I really need him to concentrate on finishing his worksheets and turning them in. So she's going on about something about, getting attention in class, and of course we're on the phone, so she can't see my face, but I'm just rage is coming from my toes and steaming out of my ears. So just so we're clear, I teach design because I love to draw. I think in pictures, I think about ideas, and I have to figure out a way to describe them in ways that no one else can. In fact, people hire designers because they have these thoughts in their heads and they cannot visualize them. And so I had grown up being able to not only make my costumes and my little drawings, but I had been taught a way to describe ideas that no one else could through pictures. And not only that, I teach college kids to unlearn ways of describing things with words so they can learn to draw. So I say, I teach drawing for a living. There's no way I'm going to have my kid not draw in class. So I told her the same story that I told you. I told her about my experience in class in first grade. I told her about my oldest son's experience in class in first grade. I told her I would not be telling my son to stop drawing, but to figure out a way to integrate it into the way that he actually was learning in class. And so, we went on from there. And I'm happy to say that it didn't really matter because Nuri was never going to not draw. This was the kid who was drawing from the time that he could hold a Sharpie marker. But at the same time, it's so hard for me to imagine that we're still in 2016 here, having to worry about whether or not kids are drawing in the accepted first grade way. And so as an educator, I think it's so important for us to realize there is no accepted first grade way. There's always going to be a time to draw. Thank you.
Thank you, Raja. I want to give a shout out to one of our members who went through the Moth workshop series, Brenda, who prepared a beautiful story, who's not able to be here today. So Brenda is a member of our immigration and refugee group, and she crafted just a beautiful story about the change in her documentation status when she was young, and that led her on this evolving, changing relationship with her family's village in Mexico and the house that she visited and now brings her children to. So I think it's, we miss her today. We miss her today. So I also, let me see here. Well, I also want to give a shout out to Sharon and Mimi, our wonderful interpreters. They're here today from DHCC, the Deaf Hearing Communication Center. And I'm going to turn the mic over to Sharon, our co-leader with the Disability and Accessibility Action Group, for a very special announcement. Here's Sharon.
Can you hear me? I am going to read, because this is not my comfortable space. But I'm here to tell you about the fact that last year, HCAN endured a great loss with the passing of a longtime member and active contributor, Nelson Vecchio. Nelson was one of the original members of the planning committee and was passionate about bringing this event to life. He would certainly have been one of our storytellers today, and we've missed him greatly over the last year and feel his absence especially today. Those of us who have been fortunate enough to work with Nelson were deeply impacted by his commitment to activism and advocacy. With this award, we would like to honor Nelson's legacy and remember him and the difference that he made in the world, in particular his profound belief in advocating without alienating. Nelson Vecchio fought for the rights of diverse groups of people by appealing to diverse groups of people. He didn't write anyone off as unreachable merely because they embraced a different point of view. The Nelson Vecchio Award for Meritorious Service to Broaden Perspectives is established in memory of Nelson Vecchio and is intended to honor an individual who, like Nelson, builds bridges rather than walls. It will be awarded to a member of the community who brings together people of diverse beliefs and ideas to further the common good. Please stay tuned later this summer for a call for submissions.
So, one last thank you to the Mainline Arts Center. To our interpreters, the storytellers. I want to encourage you, on your way out, be sure to drop by the tables to get more information about Mainline Arts Center. They have calendars, programs, brochures, all kinds of information about upcoming shows. And also a little reminder that the QR code that's on your program will take you to the HCAN website to learn more. And safe travels, and say good night.
Good night.